Today I'm going to tell you another strange story. I'm going to tell you about one long-term project that has successfully pretended to come to life on the lands that are now called the Gaza Strip. This region seems to have been specially chosen to conduct large-scale social experiments. Hamas has been gently nurtured in the Gaza Strip for 50 years. The Dome project was implemented on the neighboring territory. The projects are different, the faiths of the participants are also different, but still these two projects have one common goal: to nurture a human community with certain qualities such as cohesion, unconditional faith in the local government, and incredible hatred of the enemy. In fact, on the lands of ancient Palestine, the lines of George Orwell's novel 1984 come to life, and they come to life in seemingly different worlds. The Hamas project was cultivated in the Gaza Strip. The Dome project was grown at a distance of 1 kilometer from the wall. So, today, I'm going to talk only about the Hamas project, and this story is not as simple as it seems at first glance. So let's see how Hamas is represented in the media. Hamas is a terrorist organization that, by coincidence, seized power in the Gaza Strip. For many years, it has been shelling the state of Israel. But this was not enough for her, and on October 7th, the Hamas movement actually withdrew itself from the political arena, staging an act of senseless, monstrous attack on civilians of the state of Israel. So, everything seems to be clear. Religious fanatics who receive money from Iran attacked the state of Israel, and in response, received the destruction of their homes in the Gaza Strip. If simplified, then in the media everything looks exactly like this. But let's dig a little deeper and see how such a monstrous structure as Hamas could have appeared at all. Who financed it, and why it was supported by most of the residents of Gaza until October 2023 year. Let's start with financing. Now in Israel, they have begun to use these posters which depict Netanyahu and which are signed like this. You've been building Hamas for 14 years. You're in charge, so you're guilty. At first glance, these posters point directly to the one who brought Hamas to power. Like Netanyahu, you're to blame for everything. I am neither a fan nor a critic of Mr. Netanyahu. My relationship with him is completely neutral. It's easy to see this if you watch my critical videos about the state of Israel on Boost. There I show everything that they forget to tell about on TV, so let's go back to the poster. Some opposition forces accuse Netanyahu of having nurtured the monstrous Hamas and thereby plunged Israel into a new war. The accusation is of course serious, and yes indeed, Mr. Netanyahu is partly to blame, at least for the fact that he did not block the financial flows that went to the Gaza Strip and at the expense of which Hamas was able to arm its militants. And these flows did not come from Iran, as many people think. These flows came from America, from the European Union, from Saudi Arabia and Qatar. Here is a simple example of Israeli intelligence. A network of Hamas funding sources has been revealed. Several profitable companies abroad. It was about assets worth hundreds of millions of dollars. Hamas profited from companies that were engaged in mining, poultry farming, road construction in Sudan, twin skyscrapers in the Arab Emirates, from real estate firms and the like. At its peak, the value of this portfolio was $500 million. Intelligence provided data on these companies back in 2018 year. But Netanyahu did not stop this gold-bearing trickle, which in turn allowed the Hamas group to buy more rockets and fire at Israel much more often. It turns out that Netanyahu is to blame. It was his inaction that allowed Hamas to operate until October of the 23rd year. Yes, it's his fault. But back to the poster. There are such words there. You've been building Hamas for 14 years. This is a serious accusation, but I don't agree with it. Oddly enough, Netanyahu did not create Hamas. Dal did not prevent him from functioning in the Gaza Strip, did not prevent him from receiving finances from abroad. But that's basically it. Netanyahu has done no more for Hamas than Yitzhak Rabin, Shimon Peres, Menahem Bevin, Yitzhak Shamir, Ehud Barak, and Ariel Sharon. All of these prime ministers led the state of Israel long before Benjamin Netanyahu. And all of them indirectly contributed to the flourishing of Hamas in the lands of the Gaza Strip. In other words, all the prime ministers of the State of Israel since 1974 have turned a blind eye to the activities of a particularly dangerous group that, like an octopus, was squeezing the Gaza Strip in its arms. This group from its very birth openly proclaimed one goal: to throw out all Jews from the Palestinian lands. This group has never allowed any compromises over Palestinian lands. She was against any negotiations and agreements. And this organization seems to have been ignored by all Israeli prime ministers since 1974. They did not prevent this organization from receiving money from all over the world, and it was with this money that Hamas built its empire in Gaza. Yes, it was not easy, and it took more than a dozen years. But this is the essence of the global project. For decades, Hamas has nurtured its own special community in Gaza, its own little isolated evil world, the world which by the 2023 year was simply overflowing with hatred for the common enemy. Since 1978, several generations have grown up who only knew how to hate. We have not seen anything wrong with Hamas military camps and Hamas policies. Until 1990, Hamas refrained from striking targets in Israel itself, limiting itself to Jewish soldiers or settlers in the occupied territories. But then, he stopped holding back and started hunting all over the country. All the politicians saw it, but no one cut off the financing of Hamas, because there was not only Hamas in the Gaza Strip, but also another force, the Palestine Liberation Organization, under the leadership of Arafat. So Hamas and the Palestine Liberation Organization fought among themselves for power in the Gaza Strip until 1990. Arafat's party had more weight and influence in the Gaza Strip. It was Arafat's friends who sat in leadership positions in the Gaza Strip, and their power seemed unshakable. Arafat was sitting on the cash flows that came from Saudi Arabia. But unfortunately for Arafat's party, Saddam Hussein invaded Kuwait in 1990. Hamas condemned the invasion, but Arafat supported the Iraqi dictator, and the sponsors from the Persian Gulf did not like it very much, and the money stream for the Palestine Liberation Organization began to dry up. It seems to be a trifle, less money began to flow into the treasury of gas. And this little thing caused disastrous consequences. Arafat's friends, who occupy key positions in Gaza, began to steal godlessly. Everything was stolen: humanitarian aid, gas coupons, phone cards. Unlike Arafat, Hamas members dressed up in righteous clothes. Hospitals were built, mass wedding ceremonies were arranged for those Palestinians who did not have money for the wedding. Hamas also organized free children's camps for Palestinian children, where they were not only fed, but also instilled a love of weapons. In other words, two political groups were actively competing in the Gaza Strip. Yasser Arafat's party was famous for corruption and greed. The Hamas party preached Islam, built hospitals, schools, crushed the local university, allocated benefits to the poor, and until 1990, it did not actually arrange military incidents on the territory of the State of Israel. In other words, Hamas tried to look white and fluffy for the residents of the Gaza Strip, and it would seem that there is nothing wrong with that. What's wrong with an organization that builds hospitals, schools, maintains military children's camps, and encourages women to wear the hijab? If Israel wiped out a house, Hamas activists paid compensation to the victims. If the Palestinians were put in jail, then Hamas gave a free lawyer. Hamas also helped with free pharmacists and doctors. And Hamas received money for all this from the Persian Gulf countries, from Europe, and the United States. It would seem that a white fluffy organization that has been selflessly taking care of the residents of Gaza since 1978. And unlike Yasser Arafat's friends, he does not steal humanitarian aid and does not take bribes. Hamas threw away its white clothes in 1992. It organized a whole series of armed attacks on Israeli citizens, and did it with one goal: to prevent the implementation of the peace plan that was developed at the Madrid conference in 1991. Yasser Arafat's party and representatives of the State of Israel have agreed on a possible peace treaty between the State of Israel and the Palestine Liberation Organization. The main points of this agreement are the rejection of terrorism and the obligation to resolve the conflict peacefully. The preliminary Madrid agreements were confirmed in 1993 by the Oslo Agreement, during which Yitzhak Rabin and Yasser Arafat shook hands and were determined for a peaceful solution to the Palestinian issue. In other words, in 1993, the war in Gaza could have been stopped forever. Yasser Arafat's corrupt party, which took bribes and plundered humanitarian aid, was determined to conclude an eternal peace with the State of Israel, and this peace would open a new life for the residents of Gaza. The Palestinians would no longer live like animals surrounded by a concrete wall. Palestinians would live the life of an ordinary person in a normal country. But this peace plan did not suit either Hamas or the aggressive forces in Israel itself. On the 25th of February, 1994th year, on the day of the Purim holiday, Israeli citizen Baruch Holstein entered the Cave of the Patriarchs at 5 o'clock in the morning. At that time, there were 800 people in the cave, since it was the morning of the Friday prayer of Muslims. Holstein opened fire with a submachine gun, killing 29 people and wounding 130. Gallenstein was beaten to death with a fire extinguisher while reloading the submachine guns. This event unleashed Hamas's hands, and it carried out a series of terrorist attacks throughout Israel, which eventually led to the breakdown of peace agreements. And there is incessant chaos in the Virgo Gaza Strip. The blockade of the sector by Israel followed, shelling, which led to numerous casualties among the Palestinians. But all this has also led to the strengthening of Hamas positions in the Gaza Strip. And this movement has already begun to defeat the Palestine Liberation Party. The situation of Yasser Arafat's supporters looked so sad that in the year 2006, information began to appear that Washington was supplying weapons and military instructors to this party so that this party would restrain Hamas. But it didn't help. In the 27th year, Hamas expelled all supporters of Yasser Arafat from the Gaza Strip and became a full-fledged owner of the sector. Hamas received huge amounts of money from abroad, from Qatar, Saudi Arabia, the United States, and the European Union. With this money, underground tunnels were built, missiles were purchased, and military children's camps were maintained. Pensions were paid out of this money to the relatives of the deceased shahids. That is, from the 27th year to the 23rd year, Hamas has undivided authority with the residents of the Gaza Strip. He fed them, trained them, clothed them, sent some of them to Israel with shaheed belts, and no one actually interfered with Hamas. Hamas did not agree to any peace talks, it just wanted the Jews to leave the lands of Palestine. In 2023 year, Hamas voluntarily gave up power, carrying out a senseless massacre on the 7th of October. So all this is very significant. Since 1978, an organization has been operating in Gaza that purposefully educates citizens, treats them, trains them, builds houses for them, stimulates the birth rate, pays for weddings, funerals, and pensions. And at the same time, this organization does not wish the Palestinians a peaceful sky. She doesn't want peace agreements, all she does is raise new fighters. In the 2011 year, these fighters overthrew the government in Egypt. In 2012, they fought against Assad in Syria. In 2023 year, they attacked the State of Israel. All the prime ministers and the State of Israel have seen what is happening. But none of them has blocked the financial flows for this organization. That's it. Watch my channel.